Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another books I've read recently video in which I tell you the 10 books that I have read recently. I absolutely love filming these videos. I feel like we've made like a little book club community on here. I get messages all the time on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube comments from you guys saying you've read this book that I recommended and you loved it, or giving me book recommendations, and I just live for it. I love talking about books. I'm a huge bookworm and it just fills my heart with joy. So in this video I'm going to tell you 10 books I have read recently with some spoiler-free reviews. And of course, a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people just like us. With Skillshare you can explore new skills, develop existing interests, or get lost in your creativity. Whatever interests you, you can probably find a class for you on Skillshare. This month I want to recommend Productivity for Creatives, Build a System that Brings Out Your Best by Thomas Frank. I've recommended classes by Thomas Frank before. He's one of my favourite YouTubers and he's a productivity expert. People constantly ask how I'm able to get up the amount of long, heavily researched videos that I do, and it's all down to productivity and scheduling. And I thought I'd found the system that worked best for me and my work style, but this class has definitely given me some food for thought. This class speaks about the relationship between productivity and creativity, how you shouldn't just wait for inspiration to strike before you try and work on creative projects in whatever form that may be. But instead, inspiration is a kind of muscle that you can build through work. You can essentially train your brain to be productive and inspired at certain times, and this class tells you how you can help facilitate this. It's a really interesting angle that I haven't really thought about before, and I'm definitely going to be implementing some of the things that Thomas Frank suggests. If you're uncertain what's next for you in these strange times, creative challenges and productivity classes can be a great way to help you structure your time and set up achievable goals. Whether you're just wanting to fend off boredom, focus on self-care through creativity, or just become part of a creative community, Skillshare is the best place for you. There's even lessons to teach you how to use your voice and creativity for what you believe to be social good. You can find literally anything on Skillshare. I use it all the time and I absolutely love it. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description to sign up will get a free trial of Skillshare premium membership, and after that it's only around $10 or £7 a month. And with that, let's get into the books, starting with Marestra by L.S. Hinton. Now, I really don't want to start this video with negativity, but there's no getting around it. This is the worst book I have ever read, and honestly, just thinking about it is making me sweat. This is a prime example of how you should just give up on a book if you can tell it's not for you after the first couple of chapters. Please learn from my mistake. Never fight through a crap book. I got like 4 chapters into this and it sucked, but I was intrigued, so I continued, but it just got worse, and then I was too far into the book to stop and I felt like I was wasting my time. I just always feel like I have to finish books even if I hate them for some reason, and I really need to work on that. But anyway, this book is the most pretentious thing I've ever read in my entire life. It's about a woman called Judith who works at this prestigious art auction house in London. It name drops like artists and pieces of art constantly, but so randomly and so out of context, and if you're not interested in art then you have no idea at all what this character's talking about. It does the same a lot with fashion and fashion brands, and luckily I'm a bit more versed in that, but even that left me questioning at times. There's just no context, it's just like, oh, look how smart I am. Somehow this pretentious, snobby Judith ends up working in a strip club where a client takes a shine to her and takes her on a trip to France where bad things happen, and then Judith has to go on the run across Europe, but then suddenly she becomes a serial killer and people start dying around her, which is potentially a spoiler. I know I said this is going to be spoiler free, but honestly I would not recommend this book to any of you, so it doesn't matter if I spoil it because just don't read it, don't do it, it's not worth it. Nothing that happens in this book is explained, and Judith is the most unlikable character I've ever come across. Like, all she cares about is money and name dropping, and oh my god, and there's loads of these like random orgy sex scenes sprinkled throughout this book. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a prude and I can enjoy a sex scene as much as the next person, but it just felt so weird and disjointed. Like, the author just wanted to include as much sex as possible, and it could have been done much more naturally, but no, this book's just like, here's a flashback to an orgy I had once, and then that's it. Throughout the entirety of the book, my face was just like this meme. Nope, 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 just don't do it. You don't need to read this, don't do it. Not worth it. The next book I don't actually have to show you because I read it on my Kindle. I'm a huge Kindle fan. I know some people like really hate them, but it's just really convenient to have a Kindle. I really like it, and books are so much cheaper. Like once you've actually paid out the money for the Kindle, books in general are a lot cheaper. And I've treated myself to Kindle Unlimited this year because there are so many books on there that I want to read, so I thought, let's do it. So I've done it, and I do not regret the choice at all. The next book I have to talk to you about is The Other You by J.S. Monroe. Luckily, this book was much more enjoyable than the last one. I mean, it won't like blow your mind or anything, but it was a good, enjoyable psychological thriller, and I finished it in just a couple of days. Like once you get into this, you really can't put it down. So this is about Kate, who's a woman who's a super recognizer working for the police, meaning that she looks at somebody and she literally never forgets a face. She could see somebody in a crowd for a split second and then recognise them again months later. And you can see how that concept might come in handy for the police. Only one day, Kate gets into a car accident and suffers a brain injury which affects her recognising abilities. Whilst in hospital, she meets a man called Rob, who's this wealthy tech entrepreneur, and he helps nurse her back to health in his lovely home by the sea. But one day, Kate looks at Rob and doesn't see this kind man who spent months caring for her. Like, his face looks the same, but she becomes convinced that he's been replaced by a doppelganger. And Kate could always trust her mind and her recognising abilities before, but now she doesn't know if her mind is playing tricks on her. Like, does she even believe in doppelgangers? I must admit, I had no idea where this book was going as I was reading. Like, I flitted a lot between believing that it was the real Rob and that it was all in Kate's head to believing he was replaced by a doppelganger. I really didn't know how this book was going to end, and I enjoyed that. There's loads and loads of red herrings in this book you have to work through to get to the end. Like, yes, the premise of it is pretty far-fetched, but a book doesn't always have to be entirely believable to be a good book. And I'm very intrigued to read some more from J.S. Monroe now. Next up, we have Bad Memory by Lisa Gray. I knew I was going to enjoy this one before I even started it because it's actually the second in the private investigator Jessica Shaw series. And I loved the first one in this series, Thin Air. Shock horror, this is another crime mystery kind of thing. I really should branch out to some other genres, but why change what you enjoy? So in this, Jessica Shaw is approached by the sister of a woman who's been on death row for decades for 2 murders that she outright admitted to 30 years earlier when she was a teenager. Only now she's having flashbacks and she's not too sure that she's as guilty as everyone says she is. So it's Jessica's job to find out if Rue Hunter is guilty or not before the week is out and the state go ahead with her execution. There's not loads I can say about this book apart from I really enjoyed it. It was well paced, it was really good mystery which unravelled itself slowly but surely. I'm not a huge fan of how in some sort of mystery crime books, particularly the series, how they start spending loads of time talking about the personal lives of the investigators, like they just take whole chapters away from the main story to discuss the investigators' marital problems. But the Jessica Shaw series has a really nice way of getting to know Jessica alongside the mystery she's trying to solve. Like, it doesn't feel disjointed at all. There's quite a few different characters in this one, and you're kind of following 2 different timelines and point of views of multiple people, which can be hard to keep track of in other books, but I feel like it was really well done in this one. I wasn't confused at all, and it was all round great storytelling, would recommend. And whilst we're on the topic of Lisa Gray, I also read the next book in the Jessica Shaw series called Dark Highway. And whilst every book in the series has been great, I think this one is actually my favourite one so far. Again, it's written very similarly to Bad Memory in that there's a lot of flashbacks, all of different characters, and it doesn't seem like any of the flashbacks actually fit in with the current plot line, but it really slowly weaves together the story and it's just so cleverly done. Again, it was a really well-paced mystery, it smoothly brought everything together by the end. The opening chapter literally starts with a flashback to a murder and you have no idea what's going on, and the rest of the book is sort of just piecing this first chapter together. So in this one, Jessica Shaw is tasked with the job of finding a girl called Laurie Simmons who's gone missing. Laurie Simmons' mum thinks her murder could be linked to 2 other women who went missing on the same stretch of highway, but nobody will listen to her apart from Jessica. And saying any more than that, I suppose, will be classified as a spoiler, so I'm actually going to leave it there. I'm really sad that I've now read all of the Jessica Shaw books, and I'll definitely be picking up the next one in the series. If there ever is one, I'm sure there will be. I'll be right there reading it. My auto cue is so slow to rewind that I spend half the time when I'm filming just like chilling, just like staring into the distance. I'm just waiting for it to get to where it needs to be. That's how I film. Next up, we have Let It Snow by John Green, Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle. I've had this book on my to-read list for well over a year. A friend loaned it to me to read last Christmas, as it's a Christmassy kind of book, but I didn't get around to it, and then I didn't want to be reading about Christmas in the summer, so I just kind of waited until December came around again and made sure that I got to this. This isn't the most groundbreaking book ever, it's not one of John Green's best, but it's just a really cute Christmas read. I just enjoyed curling up on the sofa one evening with the Christmas tree lights on, and I just devoured it. It's actually an anthology written by 3 authors, so it's John Green, Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle. So each author writes a different story about how their character's Christmas Eve, Christmas Day has gone. It's all sort of set in the same town and they're all the same age, so obviously by the time you get like halfway through the second story, you start to pick up on characters and places mentioned in like all the different stories, and you sort of begin to piece it together. And by the end, all the stories sort of like join together nicely, and yeah, it's just a cute little read. The synopsis of this book on Goodreads says, "The magic of the holiday shines on these hilarious and charming interconnected tales of love, romance and breathtaking kisses," which I just think summarises it nicely. It's very typical John Green kind of writing, but I enjoy John Green. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. I've had this book in my possession for about a decade and I've never got around to reading it. It's just sat on my bookshelf watching and judging me until eventually I cracked. In all honesty, I only finally picked this up because I had 48 hours until 2020 was over, and I was one book away from reaching my Goodreads challenge of 25 books. And this is only 216 pages long with some pretty chunky text. So I knew this book was going to traumatise me and I wasn't ready to deal with it, but I did it. I actually watched the film of this years ago, so I did know what to expect. So the book actually didn't bother me as much as I expected it to. I said expect a lot there, but you get what I mean. If you have no idea what this book's about, it's about a 9-year-old boy called Bruno, who's actually the son of a high-ranking Nazi official. The whole book is written through Bruno's perspective, so it can be a bit frustrating to read at points. You just kind of want to reach through the book and shake him and like open his eyes. But he's a child, he has no idea what's going on around him. And I'd actually say the perspective might be a tad more believable though if he was written as a 6 or 7-year-old. 9 just seems a bit old to sort of see the world that he does or in the way that he does. But that's kind of a small complaint, it's a bit nitpicky. The actual book in itself is really well written, it's just as heartbreaking as you would expect. And Bruno's family have to move to Auschwitz for his father's job where he works at the concentration camp. And Bruno can actually see the camp from his bedroom window, but he has no idea what it is. He thinks the people on the other side of the fence are just there for a holiday or something. So one day Bruno goes for a walk to the fence and meets another 9-year-old boy on the other side called Shmuel. And they exchange their stories, but Bruno can't understand that life for Shmuel is awful because he's been raised himself in such privilege. He's a very naive kid, like even for a 9-year-old, it's very naive. I think it's a stretch to say this book is good because a lot of people have actually said it's a horrible retelling of what Auschwitz was really like, but in terms of just being a story, it is heartbreaking. I don't really know, it's a classic for a reason I suppose, everyone should read it at least once, but burn it after. I had seen this book, 13 by Steve Kavanagh, all over Instagram, and I was officially influenced to buy it on my Kindle, and I'm so glad I did because this might actually be one of the best psychological thrillery type books I've ever read. The tagline of this book is "The serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury," and if that doesn't entice you in, I don't know what will. So a super celebrity actor called Robert Solomon is being charged with the murder of his celebrity girlfriend and their security guard, I think, and Solomon insists it wasn't him despite evidence pointing to the contrary. A fantastic defence lawyer called Flynn ends up representing Solomon and vows to get to the bottom of what actually happened. Now, I didn't actually realise this until I'd finished this book, but this is actually the 4th in the Flynn series, but that made no difference to my understanding of the book. I don't think you need any prior context to understand the character, so it's very well written. I'm definitely going to go back and read the rest of the series though, because this one was so fantastic. The absolute best thing about this book is not only do you have the chapters written from Eddie's perspective, you also have the chapters which are written from the serial killer's perspective, which is such an interesting twist. As the reader, you kind of know from the get-go who the actual perpetrator is and what's going through his mind. It's just more of a race against time as to who is going to get to the finish line first, Eddie Flynn or the killer. It's so cleverly written. I absolutely devoured this book, and the twist at the end is fantastic. It really kept me on the edge of my seat, which, as we all know, is an impressive feat at this point in my psychological thrillery crime mystery reading career. And going in the complete opposite direction to the last book, we have Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't even know where to start with this one. Like, I know it was on the top of every single bestseller list in like 2017. Everyone was talking about it, but it just never really called to me. But then I spotted that it was available on the Kindle for like £2, so I thought, now or never, let's just do this. I'd also heard lots of good things about the TV series and I wanted to watch that, but I'm a book first kind of gal. I don't even know how to begin to summarise this plot. So much happens in just 350-ish pages. This book is set in a place called Shaker Heights, which is this perfect suburban community in Cleveland where everything is planned out perfectly. The children go to the best schools and universities, the houses are all identical, the grass is never allowed to grow more than a couple of inches, like, it's that kind of place. In Shaker Heights lives a family called the Richardsons, who are from the outside this sort of perfect suburban family headed by Elena Richardson. But then a woman called Mia Warren turns up with her daughter Pearl, and they start renting a property from the Richardsons, and they kind of disrupt the status quo. Mia is this headstrong artist woman who believes in what she thinks is the right thing. Elena is also this headstrong journalist woman who believes in what she thinks is the right thing. A family friend of the Richardsons adopts a Chinese American baby who'd been abandoned. Only Mia finds out that she knows who the real mum is, and the real mum wants the baby back. She'd just kind of fallen on hard times and didn't have any other choice. Elena hates this, Mia has secrets, Elena's determined to unravel them. If you asked me in the first half of this book, I would have told you this was crap. It was really slow to grow and nothing really happened apart from just getting to know the characters, none of whom are particularly nice people. But I actually found myself after the second half of the book thinking that it was quite good, so take from that what you will. It's a really deep look into complicated family relationships, mainly the relationship between mothers and daughters, suburban ignorance, and the problem of being different. It also looks into the issue of race a lot. Celeste Ng does a really good job at getting you as the reader to think about issues that you've never really probably put much thought into before. Like things that seem okay on the surface, but are they really? Like, who's the good guy and is there such a thing? I genuinely don't know what genre I would put this book into, but after a lot of thought, I've decided I'm actually going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. By the end, I really enjoyed the book and it made me think a lot about stuff. It was just a very slow burner. And then we have The Cousins by Karen McManus. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of Karen McManus. I got approached to do a sponsorship with a couple of her books last year or the year before, and I loved them so much that I've purchased every single book since. She definitely writes young adult fiction, and I don't care that I'm 26 years old, I still love a YA book and I have no shame about it. This is another mystery book and it was impossible to put down. I think I read the last 80% of this in one sitting because I just had to find out where this story was going. So this is a story of the stories. 3 cousins who haven't seen each other since they were young, only to each receive a mysterious letter from their estranged, rich grandmother, asking them to come visit her on the island that she lives on. These kids have never even met her. She literally disowned all 4 of her children 24 years earlier with a single note reading, "You know what you did," and she refused to see or talk to them from that day onwards. The allure of this letter is too much for the cousins and they head to Gull Cove Island to see what their grandmother, who they've never met, has to say. Only of course, it's not quite as simple as that, and there are many twists and turns as they try to uncover the truth of what really happened 24 years ago. There's so many twists and turns in this book, some you kind of expect to happen, others that you would never have seen coming. My favourite part of this book though wasn't even necessarily the mystery, it's kind of seeing the relationships between the cousins unfold. I thought it was just really sweet. Even if sometimes a little questionable, but it kind of all makes sense at the end. I'm a big Karen McManus fan and I would definitely continue to read all her books as they come out. I don't think this one was quite as good as its predecessors, but it's still definitely worth a read if you enjoyed her others. And then finally we have Our Own Private Universe by Robin Talley. Where to start with this book? Like, I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. And I think I knew subconsciously that would be the case because I've literally had this book sat on my shelf for years, and I've only picked it up because I've decided to actually read those books that sit there never being read instead of buying new ones constantly. I say as I'm awaiting a Waterstones order any moment now. I have no doubt I actually bought this book because it's gay. It's so very gay. It's a YA novel about a 15-year-old girl called Aki who's bisexual and on a summer trip away with her church. Aki is determined to cut with someone, and along comes also bisexual Krista, and they hit it off right away. Actually, they kind of hit it off in the first few pages of the book, and I must admit I was a bit disappointed because I'm quite partial to a bit of suspense, of like, will they, won't they? But that's fine. This book covers so many important topics. It talks about race, religion, and you know I live for the LGBTQ plus representation, and I just in general enjoy a bit of young adult fiction, but this one was just so young adult, like so young adult. It's about a 15-year-old girl, and like you can really tell it's about a 15-year-old girl. There's a lot of unnecessary teenage girl drama that I found myself like rolling my eyes at, but at the end of the day this is YA and I'm not a YA anymore as much as I hate to admit it. I'm a fully grown 26-year-old woman, and YA books aren't always going to be my cup of tea as much as I will continue reading them and loving the ones that I do love. I just need to accept that sometimes I'm going to pick up a YA book and it's going to be a bit young. I need to make my peace with that. I can imagine though, for little confused, questioning 15-year-old Georgia, this book would have been a godsend. Like, it's amazing how far queer representation has come in just the last decade. There were so few books like this back then, if any. I don't remember reading anything like this when I was a teenager, and now there are so many that it just makes my heart full. So in conclusion, I didn't hate this book, it just wasn't made for me, and that's okay. It's got to be okay. If you're a teenager though and want a good lesbian or bisexual romance, then this is good. It's cute. It is cute. It's just so much drama. So much drama. So there you go. They're the 10 books that I've read most recently. I've actually already read 5 whole books this year, and it's only February 9th or 10th, somewhere around there. I'm feeling really proud of myself. Like, my Goodreads goal for this year is 30, and I have a feeling if I continue on this trajectory, I'm definitely going to hit it. I just want to read all of the books that I've just sort of never got around to reading before. I've got so many books up here that are just staring at me, like, read me, and I'm going to do it. I am. As always, if you've read any of these books, then let me know what you thought in the comments down below, whether you thought the same as me or something completely different. If you've got any other recommendations for me that you think I'll like based on what I've liked here, then please let me add to my to-read list, which is already insanely long, but I can always do with more, you know? Can always do with more books to read. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out Skillshare in the top line description box down below. I honestly just love Skillshare so much. I really enjoy it. It's been a godsend for me recently. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.